My regulars right now, Amy Ridenour, president of the National Center for Public Policy Research. She's also author of the highly acclaimed book entitled Shattered Lives, which analyzes the 100 worst examples of government-managed care casualties. You can get a free copy. Go to their website at www.visitnationalcenter.org. Again, visitnationalcenter.org. Amy, good to have you back.
Glad to be with you.
On board as well, another old friend, one of my regulars for this part of the day and this part of the week, Robert Weiner, Bob, as he's also known, Democratic strategist, columnist, former communications director for Clinton drug czar General Barry McCaffrey. He's also former chief of staff for the House Committee on Aging, former communications director for both Congressman Rangel and Conyers of New York and Michigan, respectively. Bob, good to have you back.
Great to be with you, Alan. And yes, Herman Cain has given new meaning to the helping hand.
God. And they don't end. They don't end.
And we're only at 4.
Amy, what do you see happening here? Because it looks as if the lady. I know Gloria Allred. She's a friend. I've had her on my show a bunch of times.
Interesting.
But I find it unsettling that she would waive all these affidavits of people backing up the lady's story, but would not give them out. Amy Ridenour.
Well, in general, I think if you're going to make an accusation about somebody, you should be specific. I'm just waiting for MoveOn.org to come out. You'll recall that organization was founded during the 90s to tell us to move on because the President of the United States had engaged in some perjury along with more than sexual harassment. They wanted the whole country to move on, and I haven't heard from them not once yet.
Yeah, they don't want anybody moving on off this one.
But we certainly have heard from the right saying all of that, haven't we?
Well, this is so interesting because, I don't know that we're looking at a story developing as it might have had it come from the other side.
Are you kidding?
Aisle.
You think Clinton wasn't attacked, assaulted, barraged, and
He's
made
whining
his
about
statement?
being assaulted?
Be serious, Alan, if you think that Clinton wasn't
I supported
impeached.
Clinton during the whole impeachment fiasco.
Right. Okay.
I
think that's sort of
he was caught red-handed lying under oath, but it was attached to another investigation having to do with Whitewater, which was later proven to be unsubstantial.
Useless.
And as an extension of that later confirmed useless and irrelevant investigation, as an extension of that, we had a looking into whether or not Bill Clinton lied about a tryst that he had when under oath. To me, Amy, that was sort of a maneuvered self-fulfilling prophecy with a catch-22 ending to it. But at the same time,
he lied under oath, and he was an attorney.
He lied under oath.
The man's a perjurer.
Right. He lied under oath after being put in the position
of
needing to testify about a matter that, but for the investigation of Whitewater, never would have been asked of him.
Can I point out the big difference?
And Bob, you know what else, Bob?
Difference.
Because I'm just saying that now, that strips away from the Democrats from this point on any moral authority whatsoever when it comes to these issues,
right.
Doesn't it?
As the only one among the three of us subpoenaed by Ken Starr, let me point out that the difference here is that every one of Clinton's situations was consensual. Not one objection to it.
No, he was accused credibly of rape. That's spelled R-A-P, rape.
Bob, I'll thank you not to curse on my show.
Right, sorry, Alan, but that is such language because it is untrue is so offensive that it's just outrageous.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That never came up.
What the heck was going on with the first thing he perjured himself over? Putting his hand
having a relationship that was consensual. It was never rape.
Oh, good grief.
Good grief yourself. I'm the one who testified.
And B, he assaulted a state employee while he was governor.
No assault.
He perjured himself.
There was no assault. It was consensual.
The rape was consensual.
There was no rape.
The state employee.
You can use the word, but it didn't exist.
You can't even have consensual relationships with a subordinate in the 90s. Good grief.
You can have it. It doesn't make it right on the workplace. It doesn't make it legal in the workplace, but it doesn't make it rape. Does not make it rape.
I don't want to get stuck in the 90s, folks. I don't want to get stuck in the 90s. I want to get back to Herman Cain. Now, what I did want to bring up is an interesting observation.
These women were assaulted
How about
by
of a more recent calamity? Because with Bill Clinton, the sort of an apple-orange comparison construct there. Because Bill Clinton, there was a mountain. There's a great preponderance of accusation. But as I said before, and I was on Lou Dobbs recently on this one, I'm going to be, by the way, quick program note, I'm going to be on Lou Dobbs again tomorrow. in the 7:15 to 7:45 time range.
you.
But tune in 7 o'clock. Lou's on at 7. You'll see me somewhere in that hour. But one thing I pointed out on that show, Bob, is that a preponderance of accusation does not a preponderance of evidence make. And just as you were understandably quick to defend Bill Clinton for accusations which, for whatever reason, were never shown to be true in a court of law, and therefore by default he is not guilty of it in the eyes of law,
Well, Starr had to drop him.
then it would seem natural that you would also have to give the same benefit of the doubt to Herman Cain. Isn't that fair to point out, Bob Weiner?
I actually agree with you, and we probably are all in agreement here. These women, and even this latest one today, refuses to go to court about it, refuses to make a case about it in terms of an evidentiary situation. None of the women has done that.
Which in my estimation, devalues their credibility.
Absolutely
because,
correct.
And Amy, to you, absent evidence to the contrary, how is the media's treatment different from what surrounded, let's say, a former two-time Democratic presidential candidate, Senator John Edwards? Now, he cheated on his cancer-stricken wife with a woman who, as a consequence of those trysts, would eventually become the mother of Mr. Edwards' youngest child. All serious coverage of Edwards' infidelity came after he pulled out in 2008, not before. I'm not saying to lay off Cain. I am saying to stop laying off certain bad actors just because they might happen to have a D after the surname. Or am I being unreasonable about this, Amy Ridenour?
Well, I don't think you're being unreasonable. It's very bizarre that when Edwards was running for president, that nobody but the National Enquirer could figure out what was going on.
They're often
they
the
were all on
leader.
this road together.
Bob, what about that?
Yeah.
What was this aggregate media cover-up of Edwards while he was still a viable candidate, and only true blue journalism happened subsequent to his pulling out?
Well, I don't disagree. As I told my wife and Mary Alexander, who you know also, Alan, who was president of the American Trial Lawyers, my read of Edwards as I met him is some politicians are honest and straightforward. Edwards had a sly look. He'd go to the next person while he's talking to you. I never liked the way the guy dealt on a personal basis, and he's paid the price for being a slime bag.
And you would acknowledge that the Democratic-dominated press, comparatively, were much softer on him just by virtue of never getting around to him.
He's got reamed, and he's going to court now.
But they never got around to him until he pulled out. Isn't that fair to say?
It takes time.
It takes time. So that's your explanation for a fellow Dem,
time.
but that's not the
take
latitude you're going to give to an R.
No, I don't treat these things any differently one side or the other.
My friend, an opposite can't be opposite to itself. Check your Socrates, or more specifically, your Plato about Socrates. Stick with us, folks. We have assisting me in the opining department, old friends to the show. First, Amy Ridenour, president of the National Center for Public Policy Research, and Bob Weiner, Democratic strategist and columnist. Good to have you both back. Amy, to you, we're looking at a country in the form of Iran who apparently has a nuclear capability, but one that has long been the case. We're all behaving as if this is fresh news, and now we're all worried that because it's out in the open, Israel may now respond forcefully. I'm surprised Israel hasn't responded to Iran forcefully a couple of years ago, because they've had this rapidly developing nuclear program all along anyway. Amy Ridenour.
Well, it's a military challenge, to say the least, and they don't have any support in the entire world, so that hardly helps. My guess is that they're hoping something would happen, and it's just a guess on my part, where perhaps the government of Iran might change and the threat to obliterate the nation of Israel might go away.
Well, it's getting tedious, Bob, with the UN. I'm just so tired of the camouflaged persona they're able to enjoy. I've never seen such a breathtaking disconnect between the persona of an organization and the uselessness that truly describes who they are. Let's take a look at Iran. Okay, and I was mentioning this earlier. In order to create a bomb, uranium enrichment needs a cascade of about 2,000 centrifuges. These are rotating cylinders that separate the different heavy, middle, and lightweight atom densities of natural uranium through a spinning centrifugal force. Now, Iran had 1,200 in place as of 2008. Now, I got to ask, isn't it fair to say that we saw this happening a long time ago? It's like the world reminds me of the idiot at the train station who sees the locomotive coming from a mile off and then acts dumbfounded at its arrival at the depot. There's no excuse for being so surprised, Bob Weiner.
Totally correct. Iran has had the multipliers that show nuclear capacity is being developed for many years, and we did an op-ed on that. By the way, I would send our listeners to weinerpublic.com to see all the op-eds that we have done. The problem, Alan, is that we don't know what building or what underground they are in, and neither does Israel. And
actually, yes, they do.
They
do know. They know where. They don't know where all of them are, but they know where a lot of them are. What?
If they have a specific site for a nuclear capacity and it's not a hidden one, then they have a reason to go after it. And Cheney made that recommendation inside the White House, saying that don't be surprised if Israel does, and we should support them if they do. So that is a policy option. But they've got to know exactly where the thing is, because you can't just fire at Iran. It's got to be taking down the nuclear capacity facility.
Amy, why are we letting the UN have such a pivotal role in how we talk about all this and combat even not just Iran, but other oppressive regimes as well, given its almost knee-jerk aversion to penalties for violations? Haven't they often enough demonstrated the kind of timidity that ceaselessly undermines the very goals they purport to champion? I mean, the UN seems to be the embodiment of the very antithesis that supposedly explains their existence. How can they help bring about peace through the world if they're constantly caught red-handed pacifying the very oppressive regimes we're trying to protect the world from? Amy Ridenour.
Well, if you pardon me for saying so, I think it's the wrong question. The United Nations doesn't exist to do good. We created, with some allies, yes, right after World War II, the United Nations to beat the Soviets. It had purpose then. The purpose today, and this was true for Reagan and Bush 1 and Clinton and Bush 2, and it's true for Obama, and it was true before this. The purpose today is to give the executive branch a way to get around the legislative branch when doing international politics. They can go to the UN, get the UN behind it, and Congress usually stays out of it at that point. So don't look to the UN to do anything good in the world, except maybe have really big expense accounts with some trickle-down effects. That's it. It does not exist to do good. The question is, what can countries that want to do something about the threat from Iran do, and why aren't we and those few others doing it?
You know, Bob, this all dates back to when former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan called Paul Volcker, former head of the Federal Reserve, to investigate the oil for food program. Yeah. Now, the report, people should know that the oil for food program, very quickly, for those who may have forgotten, this was originally meant to help Iraq. The program was originally structured as a sort of counterweight to UN sanctions imposed upon that country because of Saddam's non-compliance with both the terms of surrender in March of 91 as well as the multiple UN resolutions that followed. But it soon degenerated, this oil for food program, into a sort of bonanza of graft for Saddam, entailing more than $20 billion in kickbacks from those whom he bought and sold. Now, what essentially this character would do, I don't want to get too led astray, but I got to get this out very quickly. He would sell oil at below market value and then purchase food and medicine at inflated prices. So thanks to UN officials and member state diplomats, the Iraqi economy really got the worst of both ends. Selling cheap and buying high, Saddam was able to take payoffs from those who had as much to gain by making it worth his while. Now, thanks to global media bias, this was never really caught on. Annan was not found to have been on the take, but he was exposed as directly responsible for the cover-up. What I mean is this, Bob. The report said, Paul Volcker's report said, that during the last 3 years of the Oil for Food program, each and every one of the 10,000 oil for food contracts had corruption written in them. And it also found that Kofi Annan was aware of these criminalized contracts and actively shielded them from the UN Security Council, effectively making the former UN Security Council Kofi Annan an accessory after the fact. Now, we have this empirically verifiable, documented history of the uselessness of this organization, yet, Bob, we still turn to them for assistance when it comes to everything else on the world stage. Is this not nonsensical at the core? Yes or no, Bob Weiner?
Yes, it's nonsensical. There is a UN corruption at all levels, Alan. What got me horribly was when I learned that the peacekeepers that went to Africa to help in the Sudan and places like that were raping the women themselves. it's just an outrage that the UN has such slimy people. That doesn't stop the need, however, for a world organization with all the countries in the world trying to do something positive together.
We have that now. We have the alternative.
The need and the validness of trying to do that.
Sure, but we have that now. It's called Facebook. Okay. Next question. Let me move on to this now. We're looking at a super committee. It's got to come up with $1.2 trillion in debt reduction by November 23rd. Thank God we've got the triggers.
That's right, except that it takes another year for that trigger to take place. So there really is a fudge factor of an extra year that the media has finally figured out. Congress can change anything or let the trigger even say it's going to happen, but they have another year before it really does.
Well, you know what? It still has to happen in this Congress.
No. It can be enacted any time before the 1 year following the trigger.
Which means it still has to happen in this Congress. It has to happen in this session.
All right.
So you're saying I'm right?
You are correct, but it is an extra year that the public hasn't figured out yet.
It is this habit I have, being correct. Amy, what to you? I still think it's going to be humiliating, embarrassing, and it's still a very real deadline. Yeah, every Congress can always repeal what the last one did, but the reason why most laws stand is because it's kind of hard to do, and in this case, I don't think that anybody would get away with it. You read.
Similar. They will all be attacked for being useless and corrupt if they don't come up with something.
So they might sneak below 9% approval.
1 point. Well, you know what, though? It doesn't matter. You know what? I remember Congress's approval rating was far below Bush, and it didn't stop a Democrat from winning the White House.
Yeah.
You got to remember, the president is never in opposition to a congressman on the ballot. So there's little correlative relevance, despite how often it's brought up. It's a useless reference, but I appreciate how Dems need to say it, because absent anything more constructive, they'll come up with whatever weakness is within reach. Again, Bob, I hate to break it to you, President Obama will not be up against Congress come the 2012 election. Anyway, as usual, never enough time, but guys, thanks again. Amy Ridenhour, Bob Weiner. Folks, you are with Battle Line Main Street. I'm Alan Nathan.